So I'm back to my process videos. Sorry, it's been a little while, but these are a series of 12 paintings that I've been doing and sharing. And this is where I'm up to, which might be a little bit ahead of where you saw last, but I've just basically been working on the composition, taking out what I don't like. And I'm at that point with these two where I've loosely got a container or a vase, and now I'm kind of building on that, building on the palette and trying to make it a bit more cohesive. So with the one on the left, I've got the dark burgundies, and I'm now working over with the greens, so a very light green and also a transparent green. And at this point, I often use transparents and also opaques. Put the green onto that painting, but it doesn't go with that color palette, so I took it off quickly. Yeah, so it's really is a mix of opaque versus transparent at this point to get some interesting shapes, to be able to see some of the history in the background. And again, I'm kind of working with the composition, but knowing that I can go, it'll probably still be a bit of a back and forth with these two. So putting down some green, it goes quite nicely with the light green and with the muted pinks and the darker burgundy. And I'm going over the top here. If you notice with my brush, I hold it very, very loosely so that I don't get exacting lines. I really don't want abstracting, when you're abstracting nature or abstracting flowers as I am here, I want it to be very loose. I don't want it to be very precise at all. It's flowers that are in my head, not flowers that are in the garden, if that makes any sense. And I nearly always loosely put stems going into the container or the loose vase at the bottom. Now I'm leaving the one on the left and moving over to the right and just knowing I need to do something dramatic. So I get the pink out, the quinacridone magenta, and I tack it pretty hard with this color. Actually, I'm just thinking I really like this color. So when I find something I like, I usually go over the top with it, and you'll see that I actually go very, very generously over a lot of this. But what I love about the quinacridone magenta is that it keeps all the history in the background while making everything on top a lot more cohesive. So I can still see all those beautiful dark black marks that I've made in previous layers. Now I'm using water to really lighten off that pink, but it's quite bright, and I use the same brush. So there's still a lot of it on the brush. So I wasn't very successful, but I'm soldiering on as I often do, knowing that if I get this magenta down, I've got that beautiful dark mark in the background. So I can get rid of some of that brightness on a later layer. But I'm just trying to go somewhere with this one, somewhere different than what I've gone on the previous paintings, the previous sets for this series of Christmas florals, Christmas wildflowers. It's a hog brush that I'm using there, so the strokes, you can actually see a lot of the strokes, which is a good difference to when you can not see, and I've used a softer brush. Now I'm just mixing a little bit more color, thinking about my next move, try not to think too hard about it. I think I'm going to come back over with some light pink. I want to just get rid of some of that, some of the background stuff. Get a little bit more of this pink on there. If you can see there at the top, I've got a green, a light pink, and a dark burgundy, almost black flower, loose flower, all around about the same size. But because I've treated them all quite differently, and will do when I go over the top, I'm happy with them all being around about the same size. I'm going to now use that light pink, get a little bit more happening in my container. Get rid of that color up the top that wasn't really blending. And I'm trying to work into the shape of that vase or container at the bottom. Wanting to get some more light pink. Oh, okay, yes, no, that's right. I use the ink, and I love ink as a defining tool on top of layers. So I can get a bit more of a story happening on the top, define a little bit more the edges of the container, loose flower marks. Just different strokes that you can't really get with the brushes. And here I am going back over some of the marks that I may have either lost or needed to define a little bit more. They're not really anything. They don't loosely say leaf or flower, but it gives you an idea of a vase. And here I'm going to actually make the shape of that bowl a little bit more defined. I think it's a sepia ink. It's not black, it's actually sepia. I quite like that shape, so I'm going over it a bit more. I do love the fine lines that the acrylic inks give out of just straight out of the dropper. Now I'm thinking about my next move. What does it need? I'm going to define a little bit more on this painting while I've got the acrylic ink out. Get a bit more shape into that flower. And I just gave it a little bit of time to dry, and I'm coming back over the top with oil pastel, which I love. These ones here are very, very soft, so I can get a good shape. And I quite often at this point use a color that matches the one underneath. So I'm coming up over the top in a very similar color. This one here is very undefined, so I'm putting a bit more of a shape into it. Different than the one to the side, but a similar size. And now I'm going to use the green. Now that green shape is bothering me, so I'm just going over the top of it with a bit of a scribble to see what I can do with it. I think in the end I'm going to need to do something a bit more dramatic over that, but for now I'm just seeing if the oil pastel can help it at all. And now I'm back over to the one on the right, and I'm going to get rid of some of the pink. There is far too much of that really bright pink on this one, but I really do need to let it probably dry before I do too much more. So I'm just going to loosely get rid of some of the area. I notice that there's two wet spots still there, so instead of really going hard with the light pink, it's a very light pink. I often mix my colors out of the palette that I've got, so you'll find in that light pink it's probably got a little bit of the green and a little bit of the quinacridone magenta and a lot of the white, so it's not straight white. And there I am just using my towels to get rid of the wet paint so it didn't put too much of the pink into it. But I'm not really happy with that top corner. I'm just getting rid of stuff so I can come back over it with something. It needs something, but I'm not sure what yet. And I've probably been working on it a bit too long, so I might need to give it a little bit of a rest. But I think I might be thinking, why don't I do something bold to this before I let it go. I think I might just need a bit more pink on the one on the left. Let's get a little bit more of the pink back. Define edges a little bit more on the flowers, on that grey and red of the lone flower. A bit of pink back. That light whitey pink is very, very light, which I like, but it's good to get a little bit of that washed out pink back onto the palette, back onto the painting. I'm working on oil color paper here with acrylics, which I often do. This is a series of 12, so it's all the same paper, all the same size. And here I'm going back onto this one. There you go. It's a big, bold move. I'm like, what am I going to do here? I think I might just put some underlayers of color into this area so I can come back over the top later on. I'm just going to put a little bit more, connect it a little bit more to the container now with a smaller brush, but the same color. And again, there I am adding a loose stalk just to add more interest and also connect the upper painting to the lower painting. Still got a little ways to go this one, but I actually really love the way the pink defines the boundaries and the black or sepia acrylic ink. And now I'm going to bring back one of the others that you've probably seen me making, but maybe it hadn't been defined to this stage. So you can see this one's probably a little bit further down. I quite like where it is. I've just got a big gap that I'm going to fill in now. But given that there's lots of flowers that are defined with color, I've decided to do an imaginary flower. It's almost like it's a thought that I'm having that isn't quite there yet. And I quite like that feeling of almost like the painting is in progress, even when it's complete. That's what I think that the hand-drawn elements do. Gives something a little bit different that I quite like. An unfinished, loose feeling to the whole piece. And yet it's quite similar to the one underneath it in the black, so they tie in together. And I think complete this piece quite nicely, at least complete it now. Just put a couple of loose stalks in with pencil, so they're there but not very seen. It's just very light and very subtle. And another one is there. You can hardly see it, but it just, I notice it. And that's just about complete now. And I'll be sharing more with you, so make sure you subscribe to see more of the series.